differently. He does not actually lose his fear, but learns to ignore it sufficiently to keep his attention mainly on the business of combat. And if he has in his trained hands a good weapon, which he knows will put the enemy out of action, this gives him a feeling of confidence, a sense of power that in large measure outweighs his fear. He knows it will soon be the other fellow's turn to be scared. Fear, when experienced, is intensely uncomfortable and seems often to be incapacitating. If the period of fright is prolonged, a man may feel that his nerves are all shot by it. For fear is disintegrating, demoralizing. It shatters morale. The soldier may be rooted to the spot, paralyzed or immobilized by fear. Nevertheless, such awful moments before an attack, when each second seems an hour, may actually be useful to any soldier. They may really add to his efficiency. For fear is the body's preparation for action. The heart pounds faster, blood pumping more rapidly to the arms and legs and brain where oxygen is needed. The lungs do their part by quickened breathing. Blood pressure goes up. Adrenaline, which is nature's own shot in the arm, is poured liberally into the bloodstream. Subtle changes in body chemistry, automatically affected by powerful emotion, serve to protect the soldier in action in ways he would never think of if he had to plan them himself. His blood clots more readily. He loses temporarily sense of fatigue, even though he may have been dog-tired. It is sometimes difficult for a tense, frightened soldier to get started into combat. To begin the action will relieve his fear. That part is taken care of by army training and discipline. Months of training have taught the soldier to respond from habit to definite battle orders, even though in battle commands often cannot be given as in training. It has become second nature to him to carry out his own job as a member of the fighting team. So there you go. This is also important. When you recognize, when you know what's going to happen, it allows you to not be scared that you're scared, right? So all of a sudden your breathing starts going faster and you feel the adrenaline going through your system. If you don't know what's happening, then it might catch you off guard. Yeah. But if you know what's happening, well, cool. That's my adrenaline. If you know when you have when you feel adrenaline actually go through your system, like let's say you're driving and somebody pulls out in front of you, almost crashed into them, right? And you can feel the adrenaline go down your arms and your legs. You felt that before?
Oh yeah.
So if you don't have any idea what that is, and it happens, it might scare you a little bit.
Yeah.
Once you know what it is, you're kind of good with it.
Yeah. It's like it's how people, I mean, I don't know the actual process, but you know how like, when you tense up before you do something, right, and you feel your heart like beating all fast and stuff like that, if you know, okay, I'm getting excited because of this, event that's big in my mind or whatever, but if you don't know, or you're like, well, I'm losing it. I feel like I'm losing it right now, you know? Like if you're, I don't know, if you're about to go skydiving or something, different for you, obviously, but the normal person, before they jump out of an airplane, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm losing it, I can't.
And that's what's a lot of the military training that you go through is to get yourself, hey, when you start fast roping out of a helicopter, when you're rappelling off of the side of a cliff or out of a window in an urban environment, or you're parachuting, static line parachute, free fall parachute, all these things that you do, when you first start doing them, there's like an adrenaline rush, but you just get used to it. And so then by the time you're getting shot at, you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is. I'm good.
Yeah.
I can carry on.
Yeah.
Back to the book. No matter how distracted your mind may be by unfamiliar and terrifying sights and smells and sounds, you act from sheer force of habit. In fact, it is habits which take care of a man if he is too frightened to think clearly, like the habit of diving for cover when bombs come down. Then, presently, you are in action. You are fighting. You are at last using your force against the foe. No more are you a depressed, frightened soul. Fear is forgotten, provided you are well trained. It's good to teach people how to respond in certain situations. Like even, when it comes to the self-defense. Hey, if you get attacked, here's what happens. Here's what you do. When they just have that plan, that's worth a lot. grabs you here, this is your reaction. Somebody grabs you there, this is your reaction. You know, those things, if you see them out of context, like if you watch a Gracie self-defense video, out of context, you'll say, well, it's going to be hard for that particular move. If you go watch like a McDojo self-defense, then you go, that's just, obviously that's never going to work. But even you watch a Gracie self-defense thing out of context, you don't understand it, you might be like, well, I don't know how that's going to work. But it's a plan that you're going to take action.
Oh, yeah.
And it is an effective plan, by the way. It's not like it's not a good plan. But the fact that you are going to immediately take action, you're going to respond to the event immediately, it's going to put you in a totally different place and a much, much infinitely better place than I just got, you know, someone just grabbed me by the head or by the arm and I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
That's a bad situation. Then that fear is going to rise. If you have a reaction, boom, you go into action.
Yeah. And then he talks about like training, right? If you know, the well-trained person, it's like you're just so, because training is just like repetition, right? All these different scenarios. So you're so used to it. It's like nothing new. You're so like used to this stimulus or whatever. Okay, remember when you're in elementary school, they do a fire drill every whatever. They ding, ding, you just calmly stand up and walk out in a single file line, you know? So like, it's kind of boring in a way, but I mean, we never had a fire in my elementary school, but I'm imagining that if once you heard, it was a specific bell that went on. It, instead of the regular bell, it would go ding, 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 ding. It was obviously a fire drill, you know, when you heard the bell. So it was so ingrained in me anyway. I'm sure everyone else felt the same way as a kid. When you heard that, you were like, oh, you just sort of automatically like a zombie stand up and line up, like, you know, it was almost like, it was like so automatic. So I'm assuming that like, if a fire actually happened,
your instinct would be to do what
just
you've
do
been
it.
trained to do.
Normally,
Totally.
you wouldn't run and scatter and be all crazy or whatever. You just, because you're so quote unquote trained just to do it, you know.
Completely. I guarantee if you look back in the history of school fires, at some point there was a school fire before they did that training and everyone panicked and freaked out and people died.
Yeah.
Or maybe people didn't die, but people said, oh, that could have gone bad. And so then, guess what you do? You rehearse it, you train. This bell means stand up, move in this direction, go out this door, assemble in the recess area for head count.
Yeah. In fact, I remember in college, someone pulled the fire alarm. It ended up to be a prank, but everyone sort of thought that, oh, this building is on fire right now.
Really?
It was in the middle of the night.
I don't think I've ever believed a fire alarm.
An actual fire?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think I've been in one situation where there was a legit fire, but I was like completely, everyone just thought I was super cool and calm, but I was actually
just
didn't
believe it.
And then finally I was, we need to get out of here.
Yeah.
But yeah, most fire, because you think about, I've experienced a lot of fire alarms, and there's a very low percentage of them that were real fires.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, well, I mean, I guess that's an added element, though. Like, if you're trained, but you never think it'll ever happen, I would think that'd be a little bit different, because almost like you run the risk of when it actually does happen and you smell smoke or see the smoke or see the flames or whatever, that might introduce an added element that you weren't expecting, you know?
Yeah.
So that might jam you up. But nonetheless, I think like when you go through it, like I remember there was a fire, but it was like way in a different building, and it was just procedure. Everyone evacuate, you know, kind of thing. And we found out it was just later or whatever. So yeah, I don't think I ever had the stimulus of the fire, but in college or whatever, when I did think that it was on fire. I didn't hear it, or I mean, I didn't smell it or see it or nothing like that.
You thought it was legit
we
on
all
fire.
thought, obviously, we're in no threat.
Yeah,
but,
because if there's no fire around you, then you think you have time to get out.
Yeah.
Right?
But it was still the same. Like, no one was panicking. It seemed
I
like
recommend that, but I'm just saying, there's no, like, what we're talking about here, there's no incentive to run.
Yeah.
Because it's just the alarm and you follow the procedure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then if you, let's say you're just lining up in a single file line calmly, because you're supposed to do it calmly. Meanwhile, the guy behind you is like choking and getting his shirt's on fire. Right, you're gonna run straight up.
I might try and help him, actually. Give him the old stop, drop, and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll. That's old school, yeah.
Try and help him out. Not just
Yeah.
running from
Well-
my bro that's on fire.
Good point.
Check. All right. It goes into some specifics here. How to fight fear. 1. Action dispels fear. Do something. In the time of suspense, when men are all ready for action but are waiting for the signal to start, fear is at its height. If the period of waiting is prolonged, perhaps delay until weather changes, the time should be occupied with preparation for action. Fight fear with necessary or manufactured work when expecting combat, when waiting for enemy bombers to return. Manufactured work. Like, hey, you just got to make something up for people to do.
Yeah.
Seems a little, yeah. And it's not hard. In combat, there's always something to get ready, right? So it's not hard to say, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple other bunkers. Let's fill some sandbags. Cool. We're all working. There's always a reason. It doesn't even have to be manufactured. It can be real. 2, physical contact with friends helps. Men should, if at all possible, stay within sight of in time of peril, but not bunched up enough to become a bomb target. Just the presence of another man not far off when no word is spoken minimizes fear. 3, roll calls help. Men in peril should be reminded that they are not alone. 4, knowledge is power over fear. Surprise is the most important element in battle. Thus, men should be constantly kept informed of the dangers they may meet. That one could be that's a little bit of a tricky one, because sometimes people would get a little freaked out when they would hear about what the enemy can do. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, I'll tell you one thing, when we were in Ramadi, there was a lot of IEDs. And if someone would come to visit us, and they wanted to come on an operation with us, we would give like the slightly longer IED brief so that they understood the threat. It wasn't always helpful for them psychologically. You could see, as the brief went on, you could see, I would watch the reactions on people's faces, and you could see them start getting really concerned.
Yeah.
Because it's just, my EOD guy standing there, here's the bomb, from, this is what it did to this vehicle yesterday, this is what it did to the vehicle the day before, here's what it looked like, here's one that they found, here's one that they did. And it was just, slideshow of bombs.
Yeah.
In the city that you're about to go into, which is not a big city. It's 2 miles, 3 miles across. So it's not like we're going and there's a small chance. And by the way, there's 7 to 10 IEDs detonated a day on Route Michigan, one road going across Ramadi. So it was, when people would come to Ramadi and they'd get that brief, it would always be sort of an interesting look on their face. Yeah. I would see people tapping their toe. Shaking their leg, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like a nervous thing. I would watch for that, and I'd see people just getting all nervous. Because, hey, it's a real thing. I mean, I get it. But the guys from TU Bruiser were kind of adjusted to it, They were adjusted to it. Back to the book. Control of action helps. To be afraid does not mean that a man must act afraid. Oh, this one's so good. To be afraid does not mean that a man must act afraid. Fear is contagious when it is expressed in action. If a man goes to pieces and becomes panicky, he must be removed from the sight of other men if that is at all possible. It is each man's responsibility to control the signs of his own fear if he can, so as to spare the others. If he can manage to act as though he were calm, he may actually become more calm. At any rate, the opposite of true is true. Giving into fear tends to increase it. There you go. It's straightforward. Don't be shaking your leg during the brief.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Don't show that you're scared, because that gets contagious and other people will start feeling like you're afraid. You gotta act like no factor. Whatever. You think they can blow me up? Bring it.
Yeah.
Bring it. You can't be panicking and freaking out. And each man is responsible to keep themselves in check, keep their fear in check. And just because you're afraid doesn't mean you get to act like it.
Yeah. Is that kind of like when
your kids get older, when your kids get older, you have to have that conversation with them. Have that conversation. Look, you don't get to act like you're scared. You don't even get to act like you're mad. That's why we play normal face. Right? You don't get to act like that.
Yeah.
You think you're going to get hit in the head with this thing? Cool. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Deal with it on the inside.
You know, like when they're young, and they fall down, right? Your kid, your son, daughter, whatever, they fall down.
Best thing you can do.
Right.
Laugh at them.
Or yes, and it's funny because there's
that was awesome.
Yeah, that's a one that I do. Yeah. But there's that split second when they fall, they're stunned, they're shocked, and they look at you with like, how am I supposed to act right now? Exactly right. So if you're like, oh my God, run up to them. Oh my gosh, are you okay? I think you start crying every time.
That noise that you just made, is my wife is the absolute greatest at this noise. She can make a grown person make you think that you should start crying and freak out. Because she just gives the
cause for alarm.
She causes so much alarm. I've been married to her for over 20 years. And we'll be driving. Just worst time to do it, by the way. We're not talking like a rainstorm on the highway going 60 miles an hour. We're talking just cruising just through like a normal area. And I'll just be, relaxed, thinking, paying attention. All of a sudden, and you know what she'll say at the end of it? She'll go, look at that car over there. It's got such a cool, and I'm thinking, darling, can you not? I've been telling her not to do this, but it's an instinct that she has. It's an instinct that my wife has to make this, and now, my son doing his driving, like he got his license so he can drive. And he came home the other day. He's like, man, he said, Dad, I'm driving with Mom and it's kind of scary. And I'm like, why? What did she do? I was thinking she was driving. He goes, no, I was driving. But I drove by like a road. And she was
can't
got
do
all
that.
tense,
Can't do it.
Don't act scared.
Don't do it. And
for some reason, my wife's that's an emotional noise that she makes. It's not fear. It's like excitement.
It's everything.
Sometimes it's like, I see something cute.
Just something that stands out.
What does that even mean?
I
see something. Why would you do this? If you see something cute, why would you go? Don't do that noise. That's the wrong noise. That noise means I'm about to get braced for impact. That's what that noise means. That noise means I'm about to get T-boned. And I have a split second to accelerate out of the kill zone. That's what that noise means. It doesn't mean, look at that cat. Stop it, woman, please. And I don't know if that's a wife thing or what, because my wife is the same way. And it actually is exactly what this book said, where you can't like act scared because it'll cause others to act scared, essentially, right? It'll induce panic, whatever. Because that's what it did. That's what your wife did to you. That's what my wife does to me when she's like on the computer and she's like, and I'm like looking around like, what's happening? We're being
like,
attacked.
Kid? Or something.
Clearly, we're all about to die in the next 15 seconds because you just made that noise.
Exactly right, and that's kind of what goes on for a split second.
I wonder, because I should have been able to deprogram myself, and I have a little bit, but it's not full. It's not a full deprogram. When I hear it, I still think imminent threat is within 14 seconds of impact.
And
if not 3 seconds.
Especially when it's out of nowhere like that.
Oh, it's
like
totally
it
out of nowhere.
Is,
We're just driving. It's a sunny day. Everything's
Fuck.
So bad. Don't make that noise unless you see a person with a machete and it's in the striking position. Don't make that noise, because that's what I think. I think Freddy Krueger's behind me with a battle axe, getting ready to take my head off.
No, I don't think he'd have a battle axe.
No, he had them weird fingers.
The knife on the fingers. But dang, that's good advice, 100%. You can't. I don't know how much you can train yourself with that though. I don't know.
I think that's a genetic programmed noise that heightens your reaction and prepares you for combat situations.
Because there's
for some reason it's warped into this thing where it can also be triggered to make that noise by a cute cat on the stove, whatever.
Or like maybe she forgot something,
Oh yeah, that's another one.
I forgot to tell you, our friends are having a baby or something like this,
No, it won't even be that. It'll be like, I forgot to tell you, I got Billy coming over to work on, the yard sprinkler.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks.
So we're not
now
gonna
that
die.
my adrenaline is through the roof, I'm glad that's going to happen.
Yo.
Check. Back to the book. There's another kind of fear that must be endured for days and weeks, perhaps months or years. If men are besieged, cut off from help, deprived of adequate defense, then the ever-present peril from the enemy may be aggravated by the greater peril of disease, famine, exposure, and there may be little chance for action. Men in the present war have endured primitive sorts of hardships that would seem to be beyond human endurance. In Bataan, on Corregidor, alone on a rubber life raft for 5 weeks in blistering sun and drenching storm, without food, without shelter, without water, without any aid but their own unquenchable spirit, their fortitude, and their faith. This means terror mixed with despair. The misery cannot be, then they must maintain sanity, courage, and life itself by their ingenuity in originating occupations for hands and minds that will relieve the tension and seem to reduce the hazards. And this is the kind of stuff that Captain Plum talked about, because figuring out stuff to do. Like, just, we're gonna figure out stuff to do. Whether it's teach yourself calligraphy by making an ear-waxed etch-a-sketch.
Dang.
Or whatever. I mean, those guys figured out things to do. Back to the book. In such trying times and intense moments, a laugh can be a lifesaver. An army officer relating experience of the World War, that's the First World War, tells of a time when badly frightened, untrained soldiers of that war had taken refuge in a roadside ditch against an unforeseen horror. The fire of American guns turned on them by mistake. Panic sent the blood pounding into my head and emptied my stomach of courage. It was bad enough to be shot at by the Boche, but there was no sense in being killed by friendly troops. My men looked wild and fingered their triggers, ready to return fire of our other battalion. Something had to be done and done quick, and Captain Wass did it unintentionally, but he still did it. "Jackson," he yelled. "Yes, Captain. Where are you?" "Right here, across the road. Stand up so I can see you." "Captain," Jackson shouted above the crackling roar of machine gun bullets, "if you want to see me, you stand up." American humor can lick anything. Smothered chuckles ran down the line, orders were given and listened to, men wriggled backwards out of the zone of fire. The first to reach the trees dashed down the line of the 3rd Battalion, shutting off the guns. So, you are going to hear jokes like that, and it is helpful. Continuing, the soldier who deliberately chooses to be blown up in order to wipe out an enemy tank or machine gun nest that would have otherwise cost the lives of his friends has ideals, has indeed all it takes to make a soldier. The commander of a ship who coolly sends away the last lifeboat and goes down with his vessel rather than abandon it while some of his men are helplessly imprisoned in one of its compartments is afraid, but governed by something more powerful than fear. That's a good statement, isn't it? Governed by something more powerful than fear. What kind of governance do you have over your own emotions? That's a good question. You may call this force idealism, conscience, religion, philosophy, tradition, code, or even habit. Or you may be modern and call it ideology. Psychologists sometimes call it the triumph of the social over the selfish instincts. They recognize this force as the most potent weapon an army can possess. Men fighting for their homes and armed with this spirit can stand their ground and win against tremendous opposing forces. Next section, why men fight. Lower animals fight from a variety of causes. Some fight because, as beasts of prey, they live by killing and devouring. Animals may fight their own kind in a tussle over a mate. They fight to defend their young, their homes, or their own lives. Some are aggressive and go about seeking what they may devour. Others fight as a last resort when they are cornered. Men, being two-legged animals, may fight for any or all of these reasons. But because they have minds capable of being moved by abstract ideas such as honor, glory, freedom, sympathy, justice, and patriotism, men also fight for what they believe to be right. Greater than fear of injury and death, Napoleon said, is the fear of shame. before a drafted man throws himself wholeheartedly into his work as a soldier, before the civilian makes up his mind to enlist in the army, he is stirred by one or perhaps many of the following forces. He may be carried away by... He's just laying out why people are in the army, and this is important to understand. If you're a leader of a bunch of people in the army, then you got to understand how they ended up there. So if you're in charge of a company, you got to understand how people ended up in a position where they're working for you. Why are they there? How did they end up there? He breaks it down for people that join the army. 1, he may be carried away by mass suggestion. An infectious martial spirit spreads through the community, roused by government officials, speakers or writers, flags are waving, bands are playing, drums are beating, and crowds are cheering. Boom. 2, he may become involved in a wave of war hysteria. Like the fervor of martial spirit, war hate is infectious. Men rush to arms at news of the enemy's evil designs or brutalities of a treacherous assault or intended invasion. 3, he may be urged on by strong spirit of adventure. 4, the ambitious, self-centered man, especially perhaps if he has been unable to achieve success in civilian life, may see war as an opportunity to gain personal glory and power. 5, he may be driven by his own combativeness. Some men delight in fighting for its own sake. Some may even be killers at heart. Because murder is outlawed in civilian life, and because in many circles even taking a poke at a man or cursing him freely is frowned upon, some combative men may find their first thrill of release in an attack on the enemy. 6, he may be unconsciously trying to relieve a grouch by violence that is considered legitimate. The man who has spent a lifetime enduring unending series of disappointments, failures, and obstacles, and who is dammed up in himself ever-mounting grievances and resentment may be able to turn all that ill will against the enemy. 7, he may have joined the army as he would apply for a job. So think about the stark difference, like between those couple there. We got one person that just wants to fight people, or one person that feels like they've been a failure and everything, and just has an opportunity to take that grudge out against the world, right? I'm a murderer at heart. And then you got another guy that, hey, I joined because this was, seems like a good job. They can pay my GI Bill or whatever. 8, he may have been driven into army life by regard for public opinion. He may feel keenly the way his friends, especially the girls, regard a military uniform and a fighting man. He may hate the thought of being considered a slacker. 9, it may be his desire to maintain his own self-esteem that moves him. He may have to end his secret shame at the thought that others are doing the fighting for him. 10, his action may be based on a feeling of oneness with the nation and on faith in the nation's leaders. 11, he might be acting out of his faith in democracy. 12, he might be compelled by his spirit of sacrifice. All these reasons why men join the army, why they accept training in many cases, why they keep on willingly when they go on overseas to a fighting front. Yet by then the motives usually change, or some of them do, and here are the chief reasons why a man fights at the front. So there's a little difference here. So this is why they joined, and now it's why they're fighting, and this is something you hear about. It's kind of a cliche thing, he's fighting for the guy to his left and to his right. This is we're going to go into it a little bit, because that is what it is, and it's true. 13, in a unit with good morale, he fights out of loyalty to his comrades and his unit. Boom, there it is. This is important, though. 14, or he may fight because he is led. Men at the front face danger and are often uncertain what to do about it. This is especially true in a unit with uncertain morale. It's like I said earlier, like sometimes the leaders, if you got a good leader that's going to make things happen, you're going to make things happen. This is a good one. 15, finally, a man may fight because there's literally nothing else to do. And of course, everyone uses the word literally now.
Literally
all the time.
Everybody. Yeah.
And if you remove that from your brain to make literally mean what it's supposed to mean, think about the sentence. Finally, a man may fight because there's literally nothing else to do. He and his comrades are in the war and at the front in battle. No one stops to figure out why he should escape from a burning house. So with fighting. So yeah, there's some people like, oh yeah, guess what? You have two choices: fight or die.
Yeah.
And you're gonna fight.
Yeah.
How men meet defeat. The way a man stands up to a blow partly, of course, depends on how heavy the blow. When a man is faced with a very difficult problem or a series of them, with any sort of obstacle or frustration, when things become too difficult, there are three sorts of things he can do. He can work at it harder, attacking the problem from new angles with increasing vigor. He can get mad and attempt to destroy the obstacle, or himself, or something else. And three, he can give up in despair and run away in apathy. The first way is the way of learning, right? When what seems like a good plan is hit upon, it is tried. If this fails, there's a signal for more thinking. When a good working plan is finally evolved, success is achieved and the man is learned. So that's the best thing to do, right? You try different solutions. All this activity is healthy unless the individual, there's a little balance, there's a little dichotomy here. All this activity is healthy unless the individual becomes so engrossed with a single problem, so obsessed by it, that he fails to eat or sleep or pay attention to other necessary problems. Can't get target fixation. Getting mad over disappointments or failures is generally not profitable. It is particularly hard on the innocent bystander because of the way men have of shifting their grouch from the original obstacle to other persons or things. The man who fails to get a promotion he has been working and longing for doesn't take a poke at the officer who refused to recommend him, much as he would like to have it out with him. Instead, he's likely to kick his buddy in the pants if he so much as raises an eyebrow. Leaders, too, may take it out on unoffending men who then wonder what's eating him. Aggression may also be turned inward onto the self. Many a man goes about kicking himself, usually figuratively, but sometimes in real self-punishment, such as banging the head or punching or kicking a hard object until the flesh is bruised. Of course, the extreme of self-punishment for disastrous failure or frustration is suicide, but mostly suicide is just giving up. If at first you don't succeed, try again. This adage may be used to maintain courage, but the process is actually governed by natural law. The number of times a man will attempt to accomplish a certain job or to reach a certain objective is governed in one direction by the importance of that particular success, and in the other direction by the effort and pain involved in trying. When the successful achievement means less than to the individual than the freedom from the strain of trying to attain it, any man will abandon the struggle. Giving up is nature's way of protecting the organism against too much pain. So, that's once you've banged your head against the wall 44 times, that's enough. You're not going to get through it on the 45th or the 46th or the 47th try. You need to find a different way. It goes on. Giving up may mean defeat, but it does not always mean surrender. In most situations, what is given up is some particular way of reaching the goal, rather than a complete abandonment of the objective. This sort of defeat results in thinking, in fresh striving, in eventual progress. A man who has been unable to get a commission in the Army may enlist, earn his stripes, and later reach an officer candidate school. Another kind of giving up results in compromise. The original objective is abandoned, but another, more easily achieved, is substituted. And this stuff these are the things that people get the impression that, well, from me, you just never give up. Like, never compromise. It sounds really cool to say that.
Yeah.
There was no t-shirt back in the day.
Sure.
Yeah. It was for H&K rifles. Yeah. And it said, in a world of compromise, some don't. And it had a picture of like an entry team going into a building. And of course, you hear that and you think that's right. No compromise ever. Yeah. But here's the problem. No compromise means if you don't win every single time, you will get defeated and destroyed. Because you're not going to win. And the problem with that is you're not going to win every time. You're not going to win every argument that you have. You're not going to win every idea that you put forth isn't going to be the idea that gets selected. And what you end up being is a person that can't work with anyone else.
Yeah.
Or you end up a person that has one chance at charging machine gun nest, and you go straight forward up the hill towards the machine gun nest, and guess what? Everyone dies.
Yeah.
You didn't achieve the mission, and everyone is dead. Now, if you would have said, you know what, we tried, we lost 2 guys, we backed up, now we're in covered position and we're waiting for some reinforcements. And when the reinforcements show up, here's the plan. We're going to put down covering fire, we're going to maneuver around to the flank, or we're going to get a heavy weapon in here, and we're going to shoot a bazooka at this thing, whatever.
Yeah. So this, when in the book where it says, give up, it's not giving up. It's more like giving up on a certain.
He says giving up does not always mean surrender.
Yeah. So surrender is like I give up on the whole mission.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
Giving up is like giving up, like just basically stop doing something that's not working, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
We had this question on the podcast: is when is it okay to quit?
Yes.
To, like, define this exact thing.
Yeah. The definition. That's kind of.
And I had the conversation with a guy that we both know who was making a great effort in a business. The business was not being successful the way he had envisioned it. And it was costing him a lot of money. It was costing him time. He was putting all of his efforts into it. And, you know, he literally asked me, hey, man, if I shift to something else, is that quitting? And I said, it's quitting, but it's not surrendering. And I actually said, what is your goal? And his goal was not to be successful in that particular business. His goal was to spend time with his family and set up a safe financial situation for them. And he kind of got his wires crossed on thinking that this business that he had started was the mission. It wasn't the mission.
Yeah.
The mission was taking care of his family and spending time with his family. And he was actually failing to do either. So sometimes you have to make those adjustments. You have to quit. Just because you quit one plan doesn't mean you surrender.
Yeah. See,
In fact, I would get mad at young SEALs when they would come up with their plan. They'd use the plan to go hit a training target. The plan would start to fail, and they wouldn't adapt. They wouldn't change. They'd stick with their plan. Hey, I'm not a quitter.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going. Oh, really? Okay, cool. We'll kill everyone that you have. You can do buddy carries the rest of the night out here in the desert. I got all night.
So it's essentially, when it comes down to it, it's almost like an issue with the language. Because, like, quitting, giving up, like, these are things that we're kind of trained to think are bad. These are bad things to quit and give up. So, and given what he's talking about, you know, like, nowadays, I've heard people use the word pivot. Like the guy you're talking about with the business, right?
Gotta pivot.
Yeah, gotta pivot. It's like, pivot, quit, give up. I mean, I'd rather use the word pivot because it sounds like, hey, I'm still on the mission, on the path. I'm just taking a different direction.
I think, we'd have to come up with a legitimate never quit, which is what we're actually taught in the SEAL teams.
But then when you say, hey, never quit, that means never surrender. That's what
it really means is lose sight of accomplishing and doing what it takes to accomplish your long-term strategic goals. Yeah. That's what it really means, but that doesn't sound as cool as never quit.
Yeah. But then give up, same thing.
Yeah, give
up means like, this is too much for me, or I'm not willing to work hard through it, or whatever. That's what it feels like it means, but in this book, it doesn't mean that. It means
here's a little dichotomy for me that kind of hurts, and I think it's pretty much ego talking, but when I hear pivot, I always think, oh, things aren't going so well, are they?
Exactly right.
Giving up on that thing, aren't you?
And you know what? That's
kind of a negative connotation, which is not good. I'm criticizing myself for even having those thoughts, because you do have to pivot in business. You do have to pivot in combat. You can't be like, oh, here's what we were trying to do and it wasn't working, so we're just going to do it harder. No, you actually have to say, hey, this isn't working and we're going to make some adjustments. We're going to pivot.
Yeah, and I think that's what that word was sort of introduced to that whole space to mean, because of all these different. But then here's the thing, though. On the flip side of that, some guys they'll give up. They'll straight up give up because it's too much work and be like, I'm going to take a new direction in life.
I'm going to pivot towards more of the
more personal stuff.
Some more personal things.
Yeah.
Focus more on,
Meanwhile, they surrendered their whole mission because it was too much work for them, or it didn't come as easy or quickly or whatever.
We're gonna pivot hard.
If we need to.
Yes.
Sure.
Check. Next, ability to accept defeat in such ways is no fault of character. In fact, a man who can take it and still do his best without bitterness is highly regarded in the army and in civilian life. But there are other ways of meeting defeat or disappointment that are destructive and may result in psychological casualty. The familiar sour grapes reaction is what happens in a man who has set his heart so firmly on a particular achievement that he can't give it up and face the fact. So he belittles or runs down the very job he wants so much to have. He says pilots are all crazy or fools and the whole flying game is a jip. We have to talk to Good Deal Dave Burke about that one. No, because that definitely happens. You get someone that's trying to achieve. You don't even care about a black belt.
Yeah.
It's not even that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Don't get one. Because apparently you're not.
Sour grapes.
Sour grapes.
You know where that expression comes
I do
from?
not.
Yeah, so I didn't either. No, until I was well into adulthood. So, it's like an old, what do you call them? Little fable. I don't know. What is it when it's like a story that didn't really happen,
fable.
but it was like, so,
Go with fable.
super short. So, this fox was hungry. He saw some grapes up on the vines, right? And so the fox was like, dang, they're pretty high, so it's all good. I'm going to jump up. I'm going to eat those grapes because I'm hungry. Jumps up, misses the grape. He can't jump high enough. So he's like, all right. He comes back and he's like, I just got to jump higher. That's all. So he jumps even higher. Still can't get him. Tries again. Still can't get him. Again. Still can't get him. Finally gives up. Doesn't pivot. Gives up. And while he's leaving, he says, these grapes were probably sour anyway.
Huh?
There it is.
There you go. Don't like that. Continuing, more likely to occur is a sort of symbolic feigned illness or physical defect. A man faced with failure to pass an examination for a promotion or he has longed for may suddenly announce that he is colorblind or nightblind or has some other previously undiscovered defect that would prevent a success. Or he may become actually ill and be honestly unaware of the connection between sudden sickness and frustration. This is a feigned physical defect is a big one for people that don't make it through some kind of military training program.
So what is that?
It's like,
we're like,
well, what happened? Oh, I hurt my leg.
right.
Like, oh,
And maybe they did it. Or wait, so are they blaming something that actually is occurring, or are they just sort of making
feigned
it up?
physical effect.
Feigned.
Hey, I couldn't do this because my leg was hurt. That's why I
Right.
didn't make it through the program because I got this, I got that.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing that they make is sometimes people actually get sick, but it's because they're, like the mind-body connection.
Huh. It's crazy.
Back to the book. Each man, no matter how strong mentally and physically, has his limits beyond which the strongest will cannot drive him. The wise man learns his own tolerances and cautiously retreats, if possible, to a more defended position when hazards and obstacles he is in danger of are too great. It's amazing that they so clearly understood this. This is 1942 or something like that. And they're saying, look, they're saying the exact same thing. That's a big revelation to say. Pivot. They're saying the same thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Rage, a two-edged weapon. A group of tanks stands in a field, silent, motionless, and dead. Suddenly switches are thrown, motors start, and they become alive. Noise bursts from their exhausts, and they roar to attack. A gun is inert and dead until a high explosive powder is set off in its chambers. A bomb without nitroglycerin is a dud. All weapons are mere useless pieces of metal until the release of energy brings them to life. Man, too, as a weapon of war, must have energy released to galvanize him into acting. Fighting soldier. And the high explosive that sets off a man's fighting power is emotion. There are certain things that a man can do in an automatic way without the fire of emotional energy, but these about to fire. Slap a man's face and he will become enraged. Drop a bomb beside him and he may become terrified. But although the two feelings may seem to the man very different, inwardly the changes that take place in his body are similar. His heart beats faster, his blood pressure rises, his blood is shifted from internal organs to the muscles, his digestion stops, sugar in his blood increases, his hands tremble, his voice quivers, the body wastes in the bladder or bowels may be expelled, he becomes alert and ready for instant action. Whether all this extreme preparation for action by the body is a good thing for the soldier, or whether it will actually endanger his life, this depends on the circumstances. In primitive hand-to-hand combat, the last ounce of energy of which the body is capable must be summoned instantly for one tremendous spurt of running to get away from peril, or for one outburst of physical strength to down the foe. Rage or fear will pour into blood the adrenaline necessary to rouse that vital energy. If immediate vigorous action is impossible, however, and if life depends instead upon the cool-headed use of skill, self-control, and discipline, then violent emotion can put the soldier in mortal peril. So this one thing can kill you or save you.
Yeah, there's an interesting differentiation there where it's like, hey, if the task kind of requires like skill and stuff, right, you got to control that. You got to, you can't be doing it. But if it's like, hey, sometimes, because let's face it, man, in life and whatever, sometimes it just, right, you just got to power through some stuff.
No doubt about it.
And actually, he said, quite eloquently, what is it, sometimes. train myself to power through these sorts of situations, even though they're true. That's gonna serve me way better in life. So if I develop that skill, yeah. So I'm like, dang. So now I got two
I
more
was
stuff
explaining
like
some of
that.
that stuff to my youngest daughter. About how competition is good. And the reason competition is good is because life is a competition. It is a straight up competition. And if you're not good at competing, if you don't get comfortable with competing, that's going to be a problem when it comes time to compete, which you will have to. You're not going to get through life without competing for things, for whatever. It doesn't happen. You're going to have to compete for a job. You're going to have to compete for, to meet someone, to be your wife or husband. There's competition going on for that.
Yeah.
They're just not like down for the cause out of the gate. No, you got to fight off other humans.
Yeah.
To get what you want.
Yeah.
Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a job, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a part in the school play. There's other people that are going to be trying. I was telling my little daughter this. You think they're just going to step aside when you show up?
Oh, yeah.
You want the lead role?
Yep. You gotta. Yeah,
no,
man.
it's a competition, and you must destroy the competition. And the way you do that is you compete. You compete in different things a lot. You push yourself, and you figure out what it takes to step up.
Yeah.
Like wrestling a lot. Wrestling puts a lot of pressure on kids. And it is straight competition, mano y mano, or in the case of my daughter, what is that? Female womano versus womano. It is straight competition, you against another human being. One of you is going to win, one of you is going to lose 100% of the time.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen, and it's all on you.
Yeah.
So that's really good for people. It's good for kids.
Yeah. Well,
Jiu-jitsu competition, same thing. And then you can just say any kind of competition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like a dichotomy too, in the spirit of accuracy. It's kind of like life. Not to get too deep here, but life is half competition, half collaboration. So, again, it could be different. It could be 60-40 and whatever
it could be
you're.
100% competition for me and a bunch of collaboration for you.
But no. But here's the thing, where you get people who lean too far towards competition. They start to alienate people, and they can't maintain relationships. Like all these problems.
They're playing the short game.
Short game, yes, and the collaboration
if
thing
they're
as
playing
well.
the long game, that's not a factor.
Yeah.
Because they're realizing, I'm going to win in the long game. So this short game is a sacrifice. No problem. Because I want to, I'm not going to do something that's going to create an antagonistic relationship with these people that I'm going to count on in the future. So guess what? We're going to take a little hit right now. We're going to make some, you make compromises because you're focused on the long game. Because ultimately, it is a competition.
Yeah. Well, it is a competition, sure. Not everything's a competition. A lot of it is a collaboration. But most times we collaborate to compete.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So it's like a little balance, like a little dance you're doing with collaboration competition. That's why I think, anyway, I don't know, but from what I can view or see, observe, that if you lean too much towards competition,
yes,
you jam yourself up. And if you lean
completely
too much towards collaboration,
there is a dichotomy.
You jam yourself up too. It's like you can't succeed. It's like you can't get out of like your little cloud.
Yeah, it should be balanced. And if you are competing on things, because there's people that compete on things that don't matter.
Yeah, that don't matter. And then or they compete when they should be collaborating.
Yeah, that's true too. Or they're afraid to compete, so they don't compete at all.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of problems. But yes, I'm speaking a little bit simplified for my daughter, because what I want my kids to realize is that there is competition.
Yeah.
And that they're part of it, whether they want to be or not. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I talk to my daughter about something and she gives me a kind of a shoulder shrug about something, when it's not a shoulder shrug situation, then you aren't understanding that things are a competition and life is a competition. And you know what? It is hard to say. It's very extreme to say everything in life or life in general or life as a whole is a competition, that's a real extreme statement, and I totally agree with your point, and you are correct that can result in then a bad attitude, and not even just a bad attitude, a bad life. I mean, you can end up, like you said, you can alienate everyone, and you can end up alone, and you're competing, and I beat that person, and now you've lost. That's the thing, is you've lost a whole section of your competition, which is developing relationships with other human beings that you can then count upon in your times of need, or that you can provide for. And it's like you've ruined everything. Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is, even that right there, if you think about it in terms of what I just said, you lost. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So ultimately, to win the competition, you have to be aware of it. You have to compete. Yeah. Competing, this is probably the crux of what we're trying to say. Competing doesn't always mean smashing the other person. Yeah. Competing doesn't always mean that. Sometimes competing means actually letting the other person win. Yeah. Competing sometimes means compromising, because I'm going to win in the long game. I'm playing the long game over here. Yeah. And you're playing around with the short game. You beat me. Hey, good job. I'm going to applaud you. I'm going to give you a golf clap.
Yeah, man, it's true. Because at the end, you can collaborate all you want. But if you have, like how you put it, the long game, which is a really, really effective way to look at it, by the way, with everything. But if you can be collaborating and be the best team player in the whole wide world, but your goal is for your team. You're the team player. Is for your team to win, whatever you're doing. And win, I mean, here's the thing where I think people get emotionally jammed up when they hear, like, everything's a competition and that shouldn't be like that or whatever. To win in life, means they think that, like, I win, you lose kind of thing. Yeah, that's part of it, But really, when it comes to, even, like, just genetically, right? You know how you say, finding a mate or reproducing, whatever. It's like survival of the fittest, right? Darwinism kind of thing. Like, organisms compete for mate, compete for this kind of. So it's kind of like that's how it is, It's not like I'm a person, you're a person, I'm gonna win and defeat you, and you're the loser. It's not that thing. It's like basically you want to be successful, and for most situations, for you to be successful, you have to beat someone else. Of them being successful.
And in order to be successful, you also have to play the game. You also have to play the game by the rules. Yeah. Because otherwise you end up ostracized or in jail, right? Because you could say, I'm going to win. Right. I'm going to make the most money. So what am I going to do? I'm going to steal it from people. I'm going to do immoral things in order to get there. That would be everything's a competition attitude, but it's the wrong attitude. Because you're not going to win in the end. You're going to lose. You're going to be in jail. So you lost. But if you realize that it is a competition, and you have to play the rules, and you have to win the game, and winning the game means that you are successful in a place where you can help other people, and you've got what you need, and that's what we're looking for. Yeah. Definite dichotomy with that one. Speaking of dichotomies, going back to the book, it is as possible to be literally blinded by rage as it is to be paralyzed by fear. A prize fighter knows that he can win against a stronger and more skilled opponent if he can rouse his opponent to violent anger, in which he strikes wildly and fails to use his science. We see that all the time. You got to maintain your composure in a fight. On the mats, even on the mats of justice, for the jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, big time. You know what movie was like the epitome of that? Was A Few Good Men. Remember at the end when he was when he made him admit to it?
Yeah.
That's exactly what he did, man. Totally. Took him out of the game, got him all riled up, made him. It's bad, man. That was good. You can't handle the truth.
That's right.
That was a good speech, though, by the way.
But he let the rage and the emotion cause a problem for him.
Jammed him up. He could have he didn't have to do anything.
No.
He just kept his mouth shut, be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Didn't do it. Tom Cruise.
And Tom Cruise, he played the game really well.
Oh, yeah.
Knew to attack his emotions.
Yep.
Isn't it funny that if you understand psychology and human nature, you can actually play it on someone and focused on something that they're going to do for themselves.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's why it's important to understand human nature. Back to the book. The main purpose behind all the long routine of military training and the preconditioning of troops to simulate battle conditions to drill into soldiers' fighting habits so deeply ingrained, so intimately second nature that they will persist in the face of the most overwhelming provocations to rage or panic. Long practice in shooting coolly at a target without undue excitement, without bloodlust, makes it possible for the soldier to shoot calmly at his target when his very life and the safety of his pals are at stake. His hand must not tremble then. His keen eye and steady nerve must not waver. Fortunately, men in civilized society have been trained since early childhood to control and discipline their natural impulses. For the normal adult, it is entirely possible for intelligence to remain in command of his behavior, and for even recently acquired habits to be retained in opposition to the instinctive impulses to run or drop his rifle and flail out with his fists. There are many degrees of anger, however, and although the violently enraged individual may be at the mercy of the enemy, a milder form of resentment, of injustice, and calm determination to avenge cruelty can serve to fill men with a fighting spirit that knows no defeat. The difference between this cool anger and rage is like the difference between tempered steel and molten iron. Oh, that's a good one. Like the difference between a raging torrent that destroys blindly and the harnessed power of a Niagara that can be directed intelligently to wipe out the enemy. Such deep and controlled anger is not to be roused artificially by any group, before any group of men. It is the automatic result of an unpardonable offense. It rises like an unquenchable fire when a man's house is attacked, when his wife or children are abused, when his own native land is invaded. Such anger can be used not only for actual killing of the enemy, but also to provide the energy needed for work behind the lines. A soldier who is determined to defeat the enemy will do anything that he feels contributes to wiping out the foe, whether it is changing the tires on a truck or unloading shells from a packing case or policing barracks in his training camp. He will fight at his job. He will do that job well and will use his own initiative to volunteer for extra duty to think up ways of doing his job more quickly and more efficiently. Anger is infectious and can spread from one person to another through personal contact. Just to see the flushed face and tense expression of a wrathy person may be enough to stir anger in others. The sound of anger in a raised voice or the sight of angry behavior is even more catching. Anger spreads most readily when the beholder is sympathetic, when he's able to put himself in the angry man's shoes, when the person who is injured is one of us. For this reason, the roused anger of a people is much greater and more moving than the sum of the individual angers within the group. They reinforce one another. Anger shared, controlled, and directed to the single purpose of destroying the enemy is a powerful force for survival and for victory. Anger is a gift.
Is that a rage against the machine?
It is indeed, yeah.
Respect.
Bringing out quotes. It goes on, hatred of the enemy makes sense. The army is organized throughout for one single purpose, fighting. Soldiers must be fighting men with a fighting spirit. But some acts of aggression by soldiers are useless to the war effort and actually dangerous to the army. When competition between companies or regiments turns into bitter rivalry, when soldiers in town for a Saturday night pick quarrels with each other or with the townspeople, when race prejudices are permitted to develop within a camp, or when officers stoop to professional jealousy, the harmful results can be as bad as those dealt out by the enemy. This is when Leif and I always say the enemy is outside the wire.
Yeah.
All those things are fighting inside the wire, fighting against ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Such conditions make rifts in the solidarity essential to the fighting morale. They cause a deterioration of discipline, produce a state of anxiety and insecurity among the troops, and worst of all, they actually drain off in ineffective petty squabbles the fighting energy, every ounce of which is needed to bring victory. The thoughtful leader, knowing that no group or nation can long survive if it is torn by internal strife or dissension with its allies, is seriously disturbed by any tendency toward personal or factional friction within his command. He well knows that victory can only come if the whole group puts all its efforts into a unified cooperative battle against a common enemy. You always end up with these little factions, right? And you have to try and prevent that. You gotta watch out for those. They sneak up on you. It happens in any organization though. I mean, people start to relate to each other, and then they pick a little common enemy, even when inside the wire.
Yeah.
And, it's like us against them.
Yeah, that's true, huh? Because in picking a common enemy, even on a social level, whatever, that like promotes cohesion within a group. Like apparently, from what I read, is like gossip, right? There's a purpose for gossip. Like if people gossip, it makes them like bond. It's weird.
Yeah, no. And actually, this book talks about rumors.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that. What are the fruitful, ripe terrain for rumors to grow, for gossip to grow?
Yeah, but the act of doing it with each other.
That's part of the reason.
No
Part of the reason is if you and I need something to connect on, well, we'll just make fun of this guy, or we'll talk smack about this guy.
Yeah.
And we kind of bond, right?
Right.
If you hate this guy and I hate this guy, bro, we're bros, man. We're in the game. We're in the game.
And this says, and you say that you should try to prevent those, little like clicks or whatever, right? To kind of. Do you think there's benefit to them actually?
There is benefit.
Maybe just on a low level,
low level. There are benefits, but it has to be balanced. Because guess what? I'm the task unit commander of Task Unit Bruiser. Yeah. I have Charlie and Delta Platoon. I want Charlie and Delta Platoon to be competitive against each other, so that they're pushing to try and make each other, or try and become their best, so they can talk smack to the other guys. We beat you in this thing. We beat you in that thing. Okay, cool. That's positive. I want that to happen. What I don't want is Delta Platoon figures out a good standard operating procedure and doesn't share it with Charlie Platoon because we want to keep outperforming them on this drill, or vice versa. Yeah. That's what we don't want to have happen. Yeah. So you've got to balance these dichotomies, yes, and you want to have these little competitive groups. And inside, guess what? Inside of Charlie Platoon, there's Squad 1 and Squad 2. Yeah. They should compete with each other. And inside Squad 1 and Squad 2, inside Squad 1, you got Fire Team 1 and Fire Team 2. They're competing against each other. And then inside that fire team, you got 2 swim pairs. And they're competing with each other. So you want to establish that healthy competition, but what you want to make sure is that it doesn't cross the boundary into sabotage.
Right. Yeah, so it's like it has to remain at all times. The little mini competitions or competitive situations have to remain within the boundary of the team goal. Like it can never cross over that, right? Like it has to be. It all has to support the team goal, right? Whatever that means.
Yes, we can't ever be taking away from the fact that we have a unified mission to execute and achieve. We can never let anything undermine that goal.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
And that right there, we throw around this term, putting the mission first, right? Yeah. Like, you got to put the mission first. Like, we throw that around. Mm-hmm. But if you think that through to its ultimate end, it is the most powerful force that you can have from a leadership perspective, from the way that you operate and the decisions that you make. Because you look at some decision that needs to get made, and if you truly ask yourself the question, okay, how will this move us towards our objective in a positive way?
Yeah.
If it will, okay, we're moving in the right direction. Sounds like a day. If it's not doing that, it's the wrong decision to make. And so it comes time to fire someone. You're firing this person because they talked back to you and they got a bad attitude. Okay. Okay, so then you ask yourself, okay, what does this do to our mission, our ability to execute our mission?
Right.
Well, the guy's a turd, and he doesn't know his job well, and he's been slacking off. Okay, and no one likes him. Guess what? He's getting fired. But, okay, wait a second. I don't like him. I don't like him because he rubs me the wrong way. I don't like him because he's got a big ego, which means he's brushing up against my big ego, which is making me hold it against him. And by the way, he's come up with a couple ideas that were better than mine, and I resent him for that. And by the way, he's asked some questions during my last brief that were really hard for me to answer. He kind of put me on the spot, right? So all these things, and so I rack those things up, and and now I put together my little clique. I start saying, hey, he did this, and he did this on this op, and all of a sudden I got a reason.
Yeah.
And now I need to ask myself, okay, am I furthering the mission? If I get rid of him, who's going to replace him? He has experience. Who's going to replace that experience? Yeah. He's another body. Who's going to replace that other body? And so if you make your decisions based on what's good for the team, by the way, what's good for the team is what's good for the mission. You have a team to accomplish the mission. If your team is dysfunctional, you're not going to accomplish the mission. If your team is destroyed or part of your team is lost, you can't accomplish the mission. So if you really truly look, is what I'm doing accomplishing? What about your family, right? Your family mission is to provide for your family and take care of your family. When you start looking at things from that standpoint, hey, I really want to get this new car.
Yeah.
Right? I really like this new car.
Sure.
Okay, we know that that's an emotional decision.
Yeah.
Buying cars for most people is an emotional decision, myself included.
Yes.
Americans, it's not even just Americans, people love cars. I don't know if it's because the advertising thing, but cars represent freedom. You have the ability to travel hundreds and thousands of miles on your own accord.
Yeah.
And maybe you just need to travel to the grocery market. But still, the car gives you freedom. Yeah. And then the car, in a deeper level, is a reflection of you.
Yeah, your identity. For sure.
It's literally something that you get inside of. And when people look at it, they're looking at the metal and steel version of you in your own mind.
Yes.
So it can be hard to drive a 1997 Dodge Grand Caravan with a duct tape on the window.
Sure.
It can be hard. The fires in San Diego in 2003, were you here for those?
Yes.
They poured ash everywhere, so that ruined a lot of paint if the cars were sitting outside. So my 1997 Dodge Grand Caravan had all peeled paint. It looked like just horrible.
Sure.
Peeled paint. It was like a dark red, but then there was these flakes of clear stuff all over it falling off.
Dang. Sorry.
So if you looked at that car, and I saw that car as a reflection of me, it was pretty low reflection, you know?
Yeah.
Nothing against my brothers out there that are driving the minivans. Props. You got the family. You make that your priority. Because what I could have done back in the day was say, you know what? I really want to get whatever.
Yeah.
The Ford F350 Super Duty Dually Extended King Cab.
Yeah, hell yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Oak trim.
Sure.
That's me.
Yeah.
I want to look like that on the outside.
Yeah.
So then what is my decision making, bro? Do I need that vehicle? I live in San Diego, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I live in San Diego. What do I do with my vehicle? I drive to work, I drive home, I take my kids to the jiu-jitsu tournaments. That's what I do with my vehicle. Mm-hmm. Do I need an F350 Super Duty Dually Extended Cab Diesel 7.3 Power Stroke engine? Do I need that?
I don't know. Kind of.
No, I don't. So what is the mission? What is the mission? First of all, we know that when I buy a car, it's going down in value. If I buy a piece of property, I buy a house, I buy a home, that's going to go up in value over time. Sure, it might go up and down a little bit, but over time, it's going to go up in value. Yeah. Over time, my kids can have that in 30 years. That they don't want that Ford in 30 years. That thing's barely even running in 30 years. Yeah. So, what is my mission? My mission is to provide for the family, protect the family, take care of the family, set them up for success in the future. What do I need to drive? I need to drive a Dodge Caravan.
Yeah.
That's what I need to drive.
I understand.
So, if you frame things correctly about what your broad mission is, you're going to do better off. You're going to make better decisions as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way it's going to be.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, speaking of leaders, here we go back to the book. The most serious of all causes for an epidemic of dissension is the bad leader. When, as sometimes happens in any organization like an army, men have placed over them a man they do not trust, one who loves to show his authority and throw his rank around, or an unreasonable martinet, the whole outfit will be filled with resentment. Since it is impossible to show this antagonism to the officer who is at fault, the troops go around with chips on their shoulders, daring each other to knock them off. The only way to wipe out such an infection of dissension is to track down and remove the cause. If men believe they have a grievance, even if the complaint is unjustified, they should be permitted to tell their troubles to someone in authority. If an officer gives them a patient hearing, investigates conditions with a fair and open mind, and explains his findings to the men, they will usually be satisfied, even in cases where it is impossible to do much to correct the objectionable state of affairs. This is such good advice. Guess what? When you're in a leadership position, you're going to have people that are going to complain about things, they're going to see problems. And what you should do in those situations is listen. Listen to what the team has to say. Listen to what that individual has to say.
Yeah.
Get feedback. That's what you should do. Back to the book. Just telling their troubles to a willing listener serves to get the air cleared. And in cases where men make constructive suggestions for correcting conditions, they will take in the organization a pride that they never had before. So your guy tells you to do something or asks you to do something or gives you a suggestion, use it and give him credit. These are reasons why for many years in our army, any officer or soldier has been free to tell a grievance to the Inspector General sent periodically to each place where there are troops. Inspector General's like a internal affairs type situation. But you shouldn't need to resort to that. You know, if you're a good commander and a good leader, when the internal affairs people show up, they get told, hey, everything's awesome. They have no grievances to put out there because they already told you. And then you gave them an answer. And then people say, well, what if I can't answer the grievances? Well, then will you figure out what the answer is? If my subordinate comes to me and says, hey, we're not getting the right food out here. Well, I don't just say, well, sorry. No, I say, okay, let me see what I can do about it. Hey, this is what's going on. By the way, there's a lack of flights heading in this direction. The supply trains are getting blown up by IEDs. We have an alternate plan for food. We're going to try and make it happen in a couple months, but right now we kind of got what we got. And now what do you say? You screw you? No, you go, okay, I understand. Yeah. We're at war, for crying out loud.
Fuck.
I understand I'm not going to get steak dinner every night. It's not happening. Even though we might want it, we're not going to get it.
Sure.
So hear out those grievances. Some people get concerned that if you start taking grievances from people, then it turns into a bitch session. Yeah, right? You heard this word, this term before, the bitch session. I'm actually, in general, not scared of bitch sessions. I'm not scared of them because if you ask me a good question, or you ask me a question, I should have an answer for it. I'm the leader. If you're in my platoon and you have a question for me, I should be able to answer it. Yeah. If you have a bitch, I should be able to give you a reason why that is occurring and why we either can move forward with some kind of a corrective measure or why we cannot because of the following limitations that we're under.
Yeah.
So I'm not really scared of bitch sessions unfolding. Have I seen them become unproductive? Absolutely. I especially see them become unproductive when we start to lose the conversation. And if a leader, if you ask me a question and I say because, you know, if you say, hey, why can't we get better food? And I say because. Then you say because of what? And I say because I said so. Now we're gonna have a problem. Yeah. Now this bitch session just became unproductive. If you say, hey, Jocko, we've been here for 2 months. Why can't we get some better food? I'm like, you know what? Right now, I don't even know, because I agree with you. The food is pretty bad, and I like food. And so let me take a note here. I'm going to write down, I'm going to send it up the chain of command. We can figure out, A, what's going on, why we don't have good food, and B, if there's a way we can possibly start making this happen. I hear you. Bitch is now subdued, right? The complaint has been subdued. Because I gave you a legitimate answer. I didn't even give you a solution by any stretch. I just gave you an answer. I just took your information and heard what you had to say, which is legitimate. I've seen people where they send up a complaint and they get subdued, but then the leader doesn't follow up on the complaint. Like, I don't follow up and actually go up the chain of command and say, why aren't we getting better food? That's going to be a problem. Next session, it's, hey, you said you were going to do something. What's the answer? And I say, well, now you're mad. Rightfully so.
Yeah. And that's really it. That's really what tells the tale. Because, like, okay, so a bitch session, right? Along with complaints come what I think is more important than, like, the complaint or the issue that's complained about. More important is the motivation to complain. So, let's say the food is junk, right? If I'm mad about that, if that bothers me, whether it be because I think the food should literally be better, it should be better right now.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's bad right now, but I think it should be, and that bothers me at the very least. That produces a motivation to complain. But if the food can be just as bad, but if I have an explanation, I have no motivation to complain, because when I'm mad at that, it's understandable. So a bitch session will develop when those motivations to complain are maintained or escalated. So, like, if you're like, saying, why? Because I said so, I'm still mad.
Totally.
Bro, and now I'm even a little bit more mad because of the way you said that to me. So that's when those bitch sessions will come. Or if you get a couple of people making the same complaint, and then another couple of people, like, kind of refuting it or something like that. Where anywhere where there's emotions, kind of.
And one key factor that you brought up is write this down.